The outcome of the elections actually was surprising. People expected that the NLD would win a number of seats, but not sweep all but one of the seats. And the reason it was surprising was because, number one, there were a lot of irregularities during the polling itself. A lot of people who went to vote found that their names weren't on the voter list and weren't able to vote. And another problem was that on the ballots themselves, in some cases, there was wax over the box where people would mark for the NLD, and so they weren't able to vote for the party that they wanted. So people were concerned that there would be enough irregularities that it would skew the results of the vote. And the other reason people didn't expect the NLD to win so many seats was they thought that there were a number of other parties running, and so votes might be split between different parties, and so the NLD wouldn't necessarily take all of those seats. So the fact that the NLD did take all those seats says two things. Number one, that the irregularities weren't enough to skew the results of the election. And number two, that in fact the majority of the people in Burma, even in the military and among civil servants, want the NLD to be in power. And so that was a really striking result. As I said, particularly in the military areas, people voted for the NLD. This election is really significant because the 2010 general election involved a lot of fraud and intimidation as well, and so voters didn't feel that their will was represented. But in this election, because there were only a few irregularities and the results really reflect the will of the people, it does reflect a change. But this election was only for over 40 seats, and we won't know until the 2015 general election to what extent the government is really comfortable allowing all the parties to run in a free and fair election. And for the parties, or for the military-backed party, there's a real concern that they wouldn't be able to win in the 2015 election, given the results of this election. So there is concern in the country that those hardliners who don't support reform might be wondering what they can do to ensure that they can win that election in 2015, and whether that would involve more irregularities or in some way trying to make it impossible for the NLD to run. We don't know. So going forward, it's going to be very important for the NLD to create relations with the military-backed party and members of the government and the military in order to ensure that that election can run smoothly and that democracy can be made irreversible in the country. The government has made the changes that it's made largely because it wants the sanctions to be revoked. And the president has taken great risks, personal risks, by making these reforms. He has the support of some members of the military, but not all members of the military. And so it's really important to reward the government for the efforts that it's made so far and to incentivize the government to continue in the reform process. So lifting some of the sanctions at this point is essential. But at the same time, the civil war in Burma, which has been going on for over 50 years, has not been completely resolved. There are ceasefires, but the peace process hasn't begun. And so seeing through this process until there's a durable peace in the country is also very important. And so maintaining some of the sanctions, which were imposed in part because of the ethnic conflict, will also be important. So it needs to be a step-by-step process. Aung San Suu Kyi met with President Thein Sein, and when she was going into the meeting, she was planning to discuss democratization in the country, as well as the peace process in the ethnic areas, and also parliamentary affairs. And coming out of the meeting, she hasn't given any details yet. All she said was that it was a good meeting. But I think that these meetings between herself and the president are extremely important in building trust on both sides, and also in identifying issues that both feel comfortable working on together so that the process can move forward. And I hope that these meetings will continue in the future. Foreign investors are very eager to move into Burma because of the rich natural resources in the country and also the market of over 60 million people. And that's also an opportunity to deal with some of the economic deprivation that people in the country have suffered. But at the same time, it's also very important that land rights be respected in the country. And right now, the judiciary is not independent from the executive branch. And so in the next months, before foreign investment really starts to come into the country on a large scale, it'll be very important for the international community to stress the importance of developing land rights laws and also an independent judiciary. At the same time, foreign assistance is going to be pouring into the country, and it's important for the government to be able to have ownership over the process of development in the country. So the government itself and also the political parties and civil society actors need to come up with a plan and a strategy for how they want to see the country developed, and they need to ask donors to coordinate with that plan rather than be leading from the outside. And finally, the peace process in the ethnic areas is really critical. There have been many ceasefires in Burma before, and they haven't resulted in a durable peace. So what needs to happen this time around is a recognition of the fact that political rights need to be granted to the ethnic minorities, and that other actors besides just the armed actors on both sides need to be part of the peacemaking process. So the political parties, civil society need to be involved so that not only military issues, but the issues of displaced civilians are dealt with in the peace process as it moves forward.